Houses were built in the centre of the road. Those warehouses remained until, well, they had to be rebuilt because of the fire in 1802. They were rebuilt and then they remained until after the Second World War. They were bombed in the war and that's when they were finally demolished. In order to commemorate warehouses, which I think is a really strange thing to do, they decided to, when this building was built, Beetham Plazza, as it is now, they decided to build a memorial fountain. And here's the plaque. Now, again, I consider this to be the most abstract memorial to Liverpool's involvement in the slave trade that you will ever see. It was erected in the 1960s, but there's no mention of slavery, slave trade, anything in it. They're all very indirect or hints at its involvement in slavery. So if you look at this, it's obviously an African shield. I don't think it's got anything to do with West Africa, but it's an African shield. It looks like something out of Zulu, doesn't it? You know, totally other part of Southern Africa we're talking about here, but again, anyway. On here it says, Gory Piazzas, originally the arcaded warehouses in the middle of the old dock road, was named after the island Gorée off the west coast of Africa. On the 14th of September 1802, the piazza was gutted by a spectacular fire described by Thomas de Quincey, the guy who wrote Confessions of an Opium Eater. In 1817, Washington Irving worked at number 1, and in 1853 to 57, Nathaniel Hawthorne, American consul in Liverpool, had his office at Washington House, Gorée. The old piazza was severely bombed in the air raid of 1941 and finally demolished between 1948 and 1950. In 1967, to mark the completion of the new piazza, this plaque was kindly presented by Camel Laird and Company, Limited, builders of the fountain. So again, it mentions Gorée Island, but there's no mention of why it's named Gorée Island. Now, if you look, you know I mentioned Gorée Island, there's a fort on the island, and the fort has 2 stairways going up. The dungeons are underneath, the governor's housing is above. These two, we'll actually go around and have a look and show you. This is the only problem with filming.
Yeah. Moving the camera.
So because there's no obvious mention of slavery on this memorial, people have tried to downplay its homage to Liverpool's involvement in slavery. When it was built, Liverpool didn't want to know about its history of slavery. But Liverpool has had a really hard time acknowledging just how important the slave trade was to its development. If you look at books written as late as 1991, I was looking at a book written in 1991, where he says there's very little evidence that the slave trade did anything to develop Liverpool. This is by a man called Adrian Jarvis, who worked at the museums. The book's called Central Liverpool Docks. And he starts off with that. That's on page 2. So right away, he's getting it out there. Well, we can't see any involvement, any benefit that Liverpool's involvement in slavery gives to the city. But if you look at these 2 walkways, the steps going up, they mirror those steps that take you up into the upper part of the castle on Gorée Island. Now, again, art is always open to interpretation. There's a door of no return which goes underneath the stairways in the old fort. Again, if you Google it, put up Gorée Fort, you'll see a picture of it. And that was the door of no return, which was what led you down to the ships on the shore of the island. Obviously, and that's where the enslaved people would then go onto the ships and be sailed over to the Americas. So there's always been a lot of debate about this memorial. Now, if you put it into the context of where it's placed, does anyone remember what this building was called before it was called Beetham Plaza? Okay, it was originally called Wilberforce House. Now, we all know William Wilberforce is seen as the great campaigner for the abolition of the slave trade. You know, he certainly championed it in Parliament. This building was erected at the same time that the fountain was put up. Now, for that building to be named Wilberforce House, William Wilberforce had no connection with Liverpool. He was hated in Liverpool, obviously because the merchants who lived in Liverpool he was affecting them in the pocket, so they had no regard for him here. So why would a building be called Wilberforce House here? Obviously it's in connection to the Gorée and its relationship with this particular part of Liverpool and its history. But currently the owners of this piazza are wanting to remove the fountain and have another block put up here. And we're now doing a lot of research into this connection to the monument and the slave trade in order to fight the development of another block of flats being put, a hotel. Actually want to put a hotel up on this site, but the residents, because this is now used for housing, are very much fighting to make sure that this remains. It's been great. It's grade 2 listed now. It's only just been listed. It's one of the few hydraulic fountains that are actually left. So yeah. So hopefully it will remain. Now, also in the street was one of the inhabitants was, you're an old boy of the Blue Coat? Yeah. Okay, well one of the inhabitants of this street was a man called William Boats. William Boats has a very interesting history. It's a real rags to riches story. Now the reason why his name was Boats is because he was found abandoned in a boat as a young child. So he was a foundling. Eventually he ends up going to the Blue Coat School. The Blue Coat School is one of Liverpool's most prestigious schools, but originally it started out as a school for the indigent poor. It was a poor children's school. William Boats went to the school, got a great education. After he was fully educated, he was then apprenticed out to sea. Starts off obviously as a cabin boy, is able to work himself up to a captain, becomes a slave ship captain. Ends up, when he retired from the sea, he ends up investing in slave ships, becomes one of the most prominent slavers in Liverpool, and he lived in a nice house in this street. He became one of the Blue Coat's greatest benefactors. The Blue Coat was, from its very initial beginnings, it was founded in 1708, but the original building that survives today was opened in 1717. But from this very early period, it was wealth accrued through slavery that developed the institution. A small piece of research has been done which actually understates the involvement of slavery in developing the institution. But even in that small piece of research, it says more than 65% of the wealth that went into the development of the Blue Coat School had come through wealth accrued through slavery. And then that was the beginning. Wealth made through slavery continued to benefit the school right up until the 1807 Act. Many of the largest benefactors who gave money every year, whose names you'll see in the annual report, are Liverpool slavers. William Boats was one of those individuals. And he was also a privateer. And one of his privateering ships captured a French ship, and on board it had about £80,000 in wealth on board. So he said to skip down Drury Lane, singing, William Boats, born a pauper, will die a lord, or something like that. And he skipped down the streets singing this after he realised that he made all this money through his privateers. Yeah. Privateers were legalised pirate ships. Basically, anytime a war broke out with any of our European neighbours, you could apply for a letter of marque, which allowed you then to send out commercial ships, maybe even slavery ships. They all had cannon on board. And if you saw a French ship, a Spanish ship, whoever it was that we were fighting against, you could go and try and take it. If you captured it, you received so much of the money, wealth or whatever was on board. The ship was sold, or you kept it and used it for your own shipping needs. You gave it something to the privy purse, and then you divided the rest with the crew. And a lot of Liverpool merchants made great fortunes through that.